Hi, and welcome to the second tutorial video dealing specifically with CMI Unit 701, in which we'll have a look at Task 2. My name is Brent, and I'm the Training Director and one of the tutors at CMBD. The first thing to note about this particular task, 2A, is that it's a substantial piece of work. If we look at the table on page 2 of the assignment brief, you'll see that we're looking for 2,000 words. This is twice what the whole of task 1 took. So, having established the word count, let's have a look at the detailed guidance notes in the assignment brief for task 2A. I have information here, and I'm going to refer to a copy of the assignment brief that I've got here. This task is all about understanding the behaviours and skills that strategic leaders need to achieve certain objectives. And the first thing to note is that we're to write an account using the critically appraise approach. We've got to make reference to theoretical concepts and use well-chosen examples. We must include subheadings, and we're given a list of subheadings in the syllabus, which I'll have a look at in a minute. We're not required to include every behaviour and skill suggested in the syllabus. We should focus on those that we feel are essential to the role we're describing. In preparation to complete the account, take time to reflect on the skills and behaviours that are the hallmark of an effective leader. Consider your own leadership experiences or the experience of being led by others. So there's two approaches that you can take here. Undertake independent research on the skills and behaviours required for leaders operating at this level, and refer to the indicative content for each of the assessment criteria in the unit specification. The other word for that, of course, is the syllabus. Now, the first thing to note in that shot of 2 pages of the syllabus is that there's a huge amount of information. 6 different topics which will become our subheadings, and the advice is to not use all of them, just pick out the ones that are relevant to you. In detail of the syllabus, we've got 6 potential subheadings. We've got ethical approaches to leadership, acts with integrity, accountability, builds trust and rapport, understands and applies legal and regulatory frameworks and governance, uses experiential knowledge, communicates with impact, and leadership theory. Within each of those topics or potential subheadings, we've also got a lot of suggested content and quite a few suggested references. What we're basically looking for is, what do you need to do within each of the areas that you've chosen? What are examples of good practice that you've seen or that you've researched? What are examples of bad practice? A classic example is the emissions scandal with some of the motor manufacturers. Whilst this is a substantial piece of work, 2,000 words in total for 2A, by the time you've chosen, for example, 4 subheadings, that's only 500 words each, so it becomes a lot less onerous when you've kind of take that approach. So what do you need to actually write about in each of these 3 or 4 subheadings that you've chosen? Well, you're writing a reflective account, so you're reflecting on and pondering about and debating which, for example, in the leadership theory section, which are the critical skills and behaviours that are required at a strategic level. What are examples of good and bad practice? You might be looking at the ethical leadership category and pointing out that the behaviour of some of the motor manufacturers in the emissions scandal wasn't exactly ethical behaviour and really doesn't lead to achieving strategic long-term aims. The recent pandemic may be a source of inspiration. There are ethical leadership aspects, having to worry about people's mental health and dealing with massive uncertainty. And remember, under each of your subheadings in your report, to draw a conclusion and express your opinion. So let's move on to 2B, where we're asked to choose 2 complex organisational challenges and explain how some of the principles, skills and behaviours could be used to tackle those or had been used in your examples. The first thing to note is that the word count allowance for this section is 1,500 words, and that we're asked to choose 2 situations and describe how to apply 3 sets of principles to them. So by the time you break it down into 750 words per organisational challenge, and then an introduction and a couple of hundred words about each of the management and leadership principles, again it becomes a lot simpler. The first thing to do is to choose our 2 challenges that we're going to talk about applying principles to. There's a lot of suggestions in the screenshot. There's a couple more on the next page as well, but it does specifically say that you're allowed to choose your own challenge. So if, for example, you've got a good story to tell about the pandemic being a challenge for your organisation, it's perfectly acceptable to choose that. The next thing to look at is the syllabus. It not only repeats the list of challenges, but it then goes into detail about 3 categories of principles that we might want to describe applying. So my advice on tackling this particular task is to make sure that you've clearly outlined the challenge that you've chosen, and then looking at the syllabus, how are you going to apply the relevant principles of strategic leadership to help deal with that situation? So that might be the application of leadership theory, if relevant, the application of change management principles, and again, if relevant, appropriate decision-making tools to help you find the way forward. This is another area of the syllabus that is absolutely stuffed full of potential references and models. Again, the advice is don't try and get them all in. Just pick out the ones that are relevant to what you're talking about. Probably the easiest way to approach this particular task is to use the suggestion of writing a narrative, a story, or writing an account. So that's pretty much it. It's a fairly chunky piece of work, but if it's broken down into its constituent parts, it's not too bad. Remember, of course, that at each stage of writing your assignment, you can send your work through to your tutor and you'll get feedback and advice and suggestions. So to summarise and wrap up this particular tutorial, keep it simple. Make sure you read the guidance and the notes in the syllabus and on the assignment brief. Be mindful of the command verb definitions and keep it where possible in the first person, describing your own observations and opinions and conclusions. Well, I think that's 701 done. I hope that I've kind of demystified some of the instructions and things in the syllabus and on the assignment brief, and if I have ended up completely and utterly confusing you, best thing to do is give me a ring or book a video chat and I'll try and unplat it all for you. Thank you for listening.